things in case something worth saving takes place on a Hangout. We're always thinking about what can happen in terms of making new videos and spreading the word better, so we tend to record the Hangouts that we do.
I've learned that it's a great thing to record all the process of these kinds of projects, so that's a good idea.
Yeah. Well,
I should stop moving.
I think both of you basically know what Catalyst is up to. It's always good for us to check in and sort of discuss an overview of how things are going, because the interaction is not only good for spreading the word, but it also helps us kind of get a little bit of perspective on the process. What we're doing seems to me to be really big and far more than two people should be able to handle, but it's very slow to spread the word and to get people really interested who can take advantage of what Catalyst is trying to do. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. So we just sort of keep plugging away at activities as we prioritize them and as we think of new things and different ways to do things. And so it's been interesting. I think that there are a few aspects of what we're doing. The first, I would say, is working directly with young people who are having a difficult time in school, and we're actually pretty active there. We have 4 to 6 young people that we're working with who are very anxious to leave school, and we're in daily contact with probably 4 of them, and actively working with 2. Always, it's the same thing, trying to communicate with their parents about why they should leave school. And we recently had a long conversation with the father of one of the kids that we talked to, which we think was pretty productive. I mean, it wasn't instantaneously receiving the answers that we wanted, but it was definitely a step forward for this student and also for us to sort of get that milestone behind us of the first conversation with an unwilling parent. So, yes. So those conversations are going on. We're exchanging emails and sort of trying to explain to him exactly what we think would be the best thing for this student. Brendan, do you want to jump in and add anything there?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, one of the sort of steps we're working on is figuring out how to get both find and like produce more content that shows success out of school, like stories of successful unschoolers or North Star participants, things like that, as well as like video and just stories of young people convincing their parents to let them out of school, or parents changing their minds from focusing only on traditional school to being open to alternatives. So, I mean, we found a number of clips. I mean, North Star and Liberated Learners has some in different places, and there are some TED Talks and TEDx Talks and so on. But it's a lot of it's still difficult because there's a question of which specific clips can be shown to parents and everyone that doesn't require lots of effort to make sense of, but gets kind of right to the point and it is inspiring and so on.
Well, yeah.
So that's one.
Yeah, we really have to put ourselves in the position of these parents who really have no concept of learning without school. And actually, you know, their kids are far more enlightened because they're experiencing it, and they've come to the understanding that what's happening in school is not good for them. So they get it. The idea is to have their teacher get it. And you know, when I talk to some kids on Twitter who have tweeted that they hate school. I try to get into conversations with them, and some of them are like, they tweet, "I hate school." So I start a conversation with them, and they think that I'm just this bizarre old woman who wants people to quit school and homeschool with her. Now think about it, that is precisely what I'm doing. I'm a bizarre old woman who wants people to quit school and homeschool with me.
Isn't it first that they try to sell something?
Huh? Yeah, well, no, it's just, yeah,
Their first thought was
There's-
that, I think.
there is a suspicion when I tweet and I give the link to Catalyst that I'm trolling for customers. So I don't do that a lot. Mostly I have some other specific things that I talk to kids about, but it's to most people the idea that school is not the way to success is completely bizarre. It doesn't matter how much you hate school, you have to get through it if you want to be successful. So kids think that even if they're absolutely miserable, and most adults think that even if their kids are absolutely miserable.
Yeah.
So when you think about what Catalyst is trying to do, it's huge, and yet it's positioned up against this monolithic idea of what you need to do in order to succeed. People ask me, why are you telling kids to drop out of school? You know, there is very little commonly known. Very little is commonly known about the first of all, how awful school is, and it doesn't have to be awful, and what alternatives could be. So, in addition to helping individual kids, we have to consider the issue of this gap. We always are talking about the gap that exists between kids who have found their way to self-directed learning alternatives and the kids who are still in school and still struggling. And a lot of our attention, I think, has been focused on illustrating that gap in some kind of way. And we actually had a conversation last weekend with Blake Bowles. I don't know if you're familiar.
Yeah, the schooler.
Yep. And we're going to work together to make more videos of kids who are successful unschoolers. And I think it would be nice if we had also parents who at one time were skeptical, but then were won over to the idea of self-directed learning.
Oh, I could definitely help there.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah. Well, I took my son out of school at the beginning of second grade, and what I uncovered, I always say what I uncovered after that was just, mind-boggling, but I was completely sold on school before that, had no idea that anything else could possibly exist.
Right.
And yeah, I also helped my steps. The other part of that story is that once I sort of started uncovering this, we happened to, I don't believe in coincidences, but we moved in with my stepkids, and my stepson, who was 14 at the time, was suffering, and we helped him drop out at 15. But even he, that's another interesting story about how he felt even after he dropped out. It's not an easy road even after they drop out. If they are you're dealing with teenagers who are already, like you were mentioning before, convinced of the validity of school and that they are somehow the problem, not schooling. Or even if they think schooling is the problem, they still think it's the only way to ever succeed, and they need this, and if they can't make it, then they're, why are they the ones that can't get through it, and etc. There's so much stuff there.
Oh,
and
yeah.
once they get out of school, they may all need different things and different changes in perspective and different types of support and etc., which Catalyst will be wonderful for many of them, just like North Star and etc. It's still not an easy road. some of them need, like a lot of unschoolers will talk about deschooling and how they give their, like, they've taken kids out of school and then they give them like this period of sort of like detoxing from school.
Yep. Depressurizing.
Right, which I think is valid and valuable, but it really, you have to know the child and pay attention because they can also get stuck in that. And every child is so different, and you're dealing with so many criteria. But at the same time, having that understanding that and that vision of something else being available and being, valid and beautiful and being able to lead to success is so amazing and useful for them. But it requires patience, and they sort of get these glimpses of like, wow, yes, that is possible for me, and at the same time, like, having a hard time maybe adapting or changing or giving up on their old thoughts of like that there's something wrong with them or that it's a struggle. I mean, North Star has been a wonderful example of being able to help the kids.
Yeah.
They've had so many success stories, yet look at how many students, how long they've been around. I think it's 14 or 15 years now.
Yeah.
It's still a small number of students that they've reached, and there's
Right.
So, you're up against, like you were saying, this is a big thing you're up against.
Yeah. And that, more and more, it just
You're
seems
already
like...
Right. And the fact that
go
you're
on.
already speaking with 6 kids is amazing. Like
Right.
I mean, it may seem a bit depressing, but it's already big because my son is now turning 19, so I took him out at the age of 7. Over a 12-year period, I mean, he and I have met a lot of people. I had Ken come here with the North Star students, half of whom had already been homeschoolers and half of whom had dropped out of school. We had an amazing session with about 50 people who attended. Still nothing happened after that because even the parents who were interested, and some of them were already sort of either had taken their child out of school or were on the verge of. It takes people forever. I think it's like an addiction where you have to hit rock bottom before you sort of realize that, okay, I've got to do things differently. There's this need to sort of try everything first before giving up on school.
Right.
So the fact that you're already in touch with 6 kids who are willing to at least open. I mean, and I'm including my child's friends who have seen how he is and how free he was and how happy and he progressed, and they would still, and they weren't doing well in school because he always hung around with kids from school, more so than homeschoolers, a bit of both, but just convince. Like, I'd stop trying to convince people, but at the same time, I'm from Quebec. We're about 20-25 years behind everywhere else, our provinces and your states that are freer. And
You mean in terms of homeschooling laws?
in terms of homeschooling laws and openness to it, yeah, I could go to the next province, which I live fairly close to the border. I could go to the next province, which is about an hour away, and open a free school with no problem. Yet in my province, it's actually illegal. So is homeschooling, sort of. They don't like when I say it's illegal, but it's not really accepted.
Yeah.
Technically, it should be following a curriculum, and it's one curriculum. Anyway, I don't know where I was going with all that, but there's my story. I get lost in my story.
I think that's really useful because a lot of what we struggle with is we know the need. We absolutely know the need. It's tremendous. It's everywhere. And when sometimes when I tweet, I get responses. I talk to kids and I say, do your friends hate school? And they say, what are you talking about? Everybody hates school. So it's not like we don't know for sure that this is a problem based on the fact that we're only working with 4 to 6 kids. We know it's a problem. All these people say that yes. I mean, I ask them, and they say yes. All all my friends hate school. I just think you can't, some people have said, well, if only 30,000 people tweet, I hate school during the course of a week, that's not very many when you look at all the, I know. But, we've thought about that, and there really isn't anything different about those kids because they tweet. It doesn't, they're not a special group of kids who hate school and tweet. It's a representative sample, and but the replies that I get are almost universally, no man, I got to finish school. I got goals. I want to make a lot of money. I got to finish school. And so how to start the movement to counteract that is what we're thinking about, is to try to influence the narrative a little bit.
Well,
and
that
often we, yeah.
The answer to that one is to look at the statistics. I mean, first of all, the likelihood of making lots of money just because they make it through high school, is pretty.
High school leads to college. College leads to a good job.
Well, but there are more and more. If you look up there's a lot of articles now on even, I think it was Time Magazine and etc. that are questioning the value of a college degree. And there's, what's his name from the Dirty Jobs guy there, Mike Rowe. How could I forget his name? My last name is the same as his. Mike Rowe, who is encouraging going into vocational studies, which is another interesting thing. And he talks about how, well, not just him, but in the articles as well, how you can make more money sooner than by getting a college degree. There are so many students all over the place, all in North America, is the same story, where they're getting into debt with college loans and still not ending up in jobs in their field, which is common everywhere. North America is like, sorry, there's going to be an interruption for a moment. I'm on a video conference call. My grown unschooler just walked in.
Well, put him in the hangout here.
Not sure he wants to get on the hangout. Do you want to get on a hangout with a Catalyst group?
Talk about your experiences as a homeschooler.
It's a little unexpected for him. Yeah, we'll plan him another evening to get him on a call.
Get him in the spotlight.
To talk about his experience. He's been videotaped. He was in one documentary that was, I think it's been put on hold at the moment, but yeah. We've had fun with it.
Yeah.
He used to come to start a free school here. I'm in Montreal, by the way. Yeah. You're all welcome to come visit. We have a jazz fest coming up.
Excellent. Oh, that would be so much fun.
Yeah,
oh, my God.
Yeah, you're all welcome. It's a beautiful time.
My husband would love it. It's only like 6 hours away from us. Something like that.
See, it's not bad. It's not bad. It's doable. We've been down to North Star. It's all doable. But he used to come to the free school meetings, and he was only, 9, 10, 11 years old, and getting to these discussions with adults because he was always the only kid there. So he's used to talking about it and explaining unschooling.
Yeah. Blake Bowles mentioned that he doesn't, sometimes he feels like these kids are being paraded for their accomplishments.
He used to force himself to those meetings and was not always happy about it, and at some point I gave up because he was always the only kid showing up. But yeah, he doesn't. I don't know if you guys know Itzy. She writes a blog called "I'm Unschooled, Yes I Can Write."
Oh yes, I've heard that. Yeah, I haven't followed it religiously, but I know about it.
Yeah, she's near us. She wrote a little zine recently about unschooling. Unschooling 101, I think she called it. I'm going to move because he's having fun with his girlfriend, actually. Going to go where it's quieter. Yeah, so, I mean, I'm in an area where we had very few of us, and she's already older. They were older than my kids. I follow Wendy Prisnitz. She writes the Life Learning magazine. Yeah. I don't know if you know about her.
Oh, yeah, no, I know about her.
Yeah, so there's lots of stuff, and I mean, it's been years. Her girls are in their 30s. She's about to retire from the magazine. In it's a long, slow process, but you guys are arriving at a time, I think, I kind of feel like there's a lot more opening and action. You know, there's at least the word unschooling and homeschooling is not completely hidden or taboo.
Well, it gives me an idea, actually, too. We've been focusing on getting videos of successful unschoolers and self-directed learners and also parents, but there is a rather an explosion of reporting in mainstream media about just various topics like the cost of college,
right.
the
value
promise of a good job after college, and how that's sort of an empty promise. Obviously, the decline of the public education system with high-stakes testing is something that is being well documented, but there's all kinds of things that we could show to parents, like this parent that we spoke with over the weekend, that should act to make little chinks in the armor of the public education. Making it through school is the secure way to success, and if you don't do that, you're sort of like swinging without a net.
Right.
So maybe there's more than just these videos that we're chasing after. We could stockpile all these articles about how the mainstream way of doing things, this guarantee of success, is a lie.
Yep.
No guarantee.
Right.
I think those are important for parents right now, and even for those kids who are still sold on that idea. I think that's very important. That's a big, as you said, chink in the armor, because it's not.
They want to be rich. They want a good job, and they want to be rich, and they want to be comfortable, and that also is a failure of public education.
Yes.
Because their whole educational lives, nothing that's been important to them has been anything that they've been allowed to study, nothing that they feel attracted to. So they've sort of given up on the whole idea and of actually learning and actually having a passion and following it. Therefore, they want to be rich. And no matter how out of reach that is in a realistic way, the fact that what their people are looking for and wanting is very shallow, that's obviously a fault that you could place at the door of public education.
Mm-hmm. Even if you just look at the percentages, how many people are actually rich? What do they consider rich, first of all? How many people are? How many people are?
Then let's talk about the 99% and the 1%.
Well, exactly. How many people are rich, and how many people have college degrees? I mean, it's not equal. They're not going to be rich. Okay, it might lead to a better job if you're lucky enough to get into your field. If you're like nowadays, the statistics on changing careers, you're going to change careers at least 2-point-something times in your lifetime. So what do you do when it's time for you to change career? Back at school again, you've just barely paid off your loan. Is that really the path?
The false promise.
False promise.
That's something I think we might see. We're going into this whole issue of the gap between those in high education, between those who are learning and those they need it, even if they don't know they need it. But I think this other direction, the false promise, I'm sure there are TED Talks on that if we need videos. There's a lot of print material about it, but I'm sure that we could find TED Talks of people talking about that issue.
Yeah, I can't think of any offhand, but yeah.
Yeah,
it's not to make one.
Right. I mean, I think in many ways the biggest thing isn't a desire to be rich, but it's the fear of being homeless or having like the worst possible job or being miserable. I mean, that's another. That's another.
The reality is most graduates are graduating from college and having to move back home. I mean, there's so much written about that.
And I like that because my kid's going off to college and I'm not ready. I am just plain not ready to say goodbye. So the fact that he's probably going to have to move back in with me, I'm fine.
It's not a bad thing. I mean, we used to live, if you look back, you know, we used to live as larger extended families together. It's nothing right or wrong about it. We just have this attitude of independence being that you don't come back home. So I think good coming out of it, that realization that no, we can continue to be interdependent as opposed to becoming dependent on, you know, you're not necessarily dependent when you're moving back. It's just that the price and the reality of, you know, I mean, there's good going to come out of it. At the same time, it is a reality. I think people want to escape what their parents are living. That struggle, the financial struggle, you know, and a lot of, one of the things I discovered over the years was a lot of, like that older generation, not necessarily parents right now, even grandparents maybe, they have this thing like they had to drop out of school and go to work, and so they were held back in their careers, etc. And that may have been true for them, and they lost opportunities because they didn't have the higher education. And so they project that onto this generation without realizing, yes, but things have changed now. Yeah. I mean, I remember my neighbor, who was like some sort of, you know, mechanic, was complaining because if he had had his engineering degree, he would have, you know, had that higher job. And meanwhile, he's talking to me, and I'm looking, he's got 2 Lexus in his driveway and a nice home in the suburbs. Most engineers, there's not that many jobs. There's so many of them graduating in engineering or computer engineering and all kinds of like technology fields now, and there's going to be such an influx. There's no way all those people are getting the higher jobs. He doesn't realize what he got out of his much lower degree is more than what college grads are going to get now.
Yeah. It's interesting. We there's this joke that we pass around that one of the parents of one of the kids that we talk to refers to us as people living in their basements, who maybe even in the basements of their parents' houses. They're militantly, some parents are militantly opposed to the idea of leaving school, and the things that they say are actually the opposite of what's true.
Yes.
And
yes, they have a very twisted perspective, but it's what we're sold on. And it's also to do with our experiences, but our experiences are in the past. That's no longer the reality.
Right. And I think there is definitely a hopelessness, a perception of the lack of opportunity. That's why the lottery does so well. That's why casinos do so well. There is a lack of hopelessness in the remuneration of hard work, even if you are passionate. And passions and interests are not being fostered in education. So, I mean, if you have something that you're passionate about and you get really good at it so that you're kind of an expert in whatever your field is, you might be able to find that niche. You might be able to find a way, a place, somehow to earn a living doing what you're passionate about. I always think about my friend who's down the road from me who is the best knitter I've ever met, and she's always been. She helped my mother. She helps everybody with knitting. Well, about 10 years ago, she opened a knitting store in a local town, and her wants are very few. She has her knitting store. It's an underground storefront, and everybody in Waldo County goes to her for knitting advice and to buy. So she has found. I used to ask her, are you thinking about expanding your shop, moving into bigger places? Why on earth would I do that? She makes her living, and she does what she loves, and her wants are very few. So if you can find that niche, and it's interesting because my son is a little bit of a Taoist, and he tells me the story about the solid wooden door that you beat up against, and you can't break it down, but water will always find the holes in the door. And that's kind of the way I look at when everybody talks about innovation. But the fact is that what is going to make you succeed, especially in a place like this, if you want to stay in Waldo County, Maine, there's no opportunity here at all, you're going to have to turn into water rather than beat up against this door. You're going to have to find a way. And that really does require you to think in an entrepreneurial way about your life.
Yes.
And that is not being taught at school. At least, a stop clock is right twice a day. It may happen to some kids sometimes, but it's certainly not happening to
Right.
the majority. You're not finding that way to sort of fit in like a puzzle piece to the life that you want to have.
I think one of the things that gets used a lot, though, is the example of like artists or like musicians or other similar fields where people are following their passions and interests, but there's no way that they have found or can find to make money at it. And I think one of the things to be discussed is that, well, that's the point, is that unless we focus on it, unless we change the way people are not only developing their interests, but networking, connecting, and creating spaces where you can make money, and attitudes and perceptions where we can make money, meeting people's needs, like a knitter. If a kid said I'm gonna be a knitter, come on, what are the parents gonna, And yet it's possible.
Oh, well, she is better at it than everybody else.
Right.
She was on the school board with me, and I used to sit in her shop and talk to her about education issues. And I learned how to knit so that I would have the right to one of the chairs. And people would run into her shop, run down the stairs, and say, "I'm stuck, I don't know what I did." And they would hand her knitting, and she would continue talking to me about education issues while she's fixing somebody's sweater.
Mm-hmm.
I love the whole idea of that, because it really is, it's not a popular thing to be the best knitter in the county. No. But, and the fact is that she had some advantages. She had money to put into the store, and
right.
if you don't have those kind of advantages, it becomes much, it just seems much more.
But the more people are choosing to create a different path, the more they can come together and help each other.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Right. Like where I live, there's actually been knitting stores that have opened and closed, but if they create, it still has continued in popularity, and the knitters are finding ways of getting together and creating things and further developing what they can offer, and it's changing attitudes from people about what they're willing. Oh, maybe I will learn to knit, or maybe I am willing to put a little bit of money into, paying this person either to teach me or to sell me supplies or whatever it is that they can,
I also think the fact that her wants are few. She's the most frugal person I've ever met in my life, and she would never have expanded into a bigger store, because that's how businesses fail. So she just stuck with what she had and that she knew worked. I've never seen so much inventory in one tiny little store before, but she had it really nicely arranged. It was, it was her passion, and just the right time in the right place. And by the time she opened that store, I tell you, most people already knew of her.
Right.
This is really good knitters. Anyway, not to belabor the point.
There are paths to successful business and others where it fails because of the way it's been developed or jumped into or whatever. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But that is part of when people discover and start enjoying what they're doing, or either what they're learning or what they're contributing, then that idea of needing to be rich, I think, does start to break down also, because they realize, like, I could be happy with just this. I could be happy with this level as long as I can do this a good part of my time, not necessarily full time always. It can be supplemented, with a regular job that maybe they enjoy less. But as long as I can do this and keep doing this, then I'll be happy. Yeah. But I think that takes, again, it's experience and a little bit of time and patience and trying things out, But it's so much more hopeful and interesting than the other choices.
Right.
There's a joke here that it goes by the saying, you have a degree in one thing, you're working something else. something other. You have another job. That is the same situation also here where I live.
Where are you?
In Macedonia.
Wow. Yes. See, it's a common.
Well, when kids go to college, they don't really have sometimes they have a strong idea of what they want to do with their life. Sometimes definitely, but oftentimes people go to college before they have a strong idea of what they want to do with their life.
Yes.
Depending in part on how good their early school years were in terms of letting them develop an idea of what they love and what they're able to accomplish. So, in that sense, a liberal arts education, as it's been idealized, is just making you a well-rounded person. So, you don't necessarily go into the thing that you majored in. But still,
Right.
It's happening in this day and age. Having it happen right after you leave high school I don't know. I think it doesn't work out it often doesn't work out that that's the best way of doing it.
Right, it's basically more standardization in a lot of ways.
Right.
Everyone has to learn the same mix of things after learning the same mix of things for all those years. But I think one thing today that makes a big difference is there's so many ways to learn and be exposed to all these things that are possible to learn that used to be harder because of the internet. I mean, everything from MOOCs to YouTube to Wikipedia to like all kinds of people who know things who are out there sharing what they know in books and blogs and all of those things. So it's possible to connect with all kinds of learning beyond traditional structures more easily than ever.
Yes.
So that helps our cause, I think, a lot.
Yeah, certainly.
Absolutely.
What's that thing that we said before, the false promise?
Yeah.
Is that what I was calling it?
Yes.
False
That
promise
was about the
of
depth.
history.
Yeah.
Do you guys know the Uncollege website and movement?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
Brendan is more familiar with that stuff than I am.
Yeah, I'm actually an admin of the Uncollege Network group, although that's not really as active as it used to be, and it's not affiliated with Uncollege itself. I mean, it was originally, but
Oh yeah. Okay.
But yeah, I've like looked into all of that a lot.
Talk a little bit about, you've been looking into this master's program? What was that called?
Open Masters program.
Open Masters.
Right. So, I mean, it's basically one of a number of sort of innovations or alternatives to traditional college that people are building. And I mean, the way they're doing it now, I mean, it's almost free. I mean, they do have a cost model they set up, which is something like a couple $100 a year to cover basically some sort of coaching. But basically, people declare a master's program that's not affiliated with a traditional university, and then put it together, find mentors and resources, and do an equivalent thing to graduate school, basically on their own.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, I may do that. I mean, I myself dropped out of college several different times, and I went back because I couldn't figure out what else to do. And then I realized that I wasn't happy in school either again, and I wasn't learning that much there, and quit again. And I found I've learned a lot more online and by connecting with people and all this stuff, but it's taken a long time to figure all that out. So I'm interested in how people can take paths, including for higher ed, that are different from traditional institutions.
Excellent.
Got some cross conversation back here. So I don't know. I'm seeing some kind of a site that talks about the whole issue of breaking the promise of success that will result from mainstream education. that will go in a few different directions. It will, all of these, like I was talking about the mainstream articles that talked about issues of college debt and other ways in which success is certainly not guaranteed. And then also going into the economics of the current society and jobs and what it takes to be successful and have a successful life. We could have one site where parents could go and just sort of get what we think is more of a honest picture of the future ahead of kids who hate school. Kids are in conflict with their parents about school. They say they don't want to go. The parents say, well, you have to because that's the way to be successful. If we could make a strong case through all kinds of multimedia that what you're depending on doesn't exist, what you're thinking can happen if your kid struggles through this hate of school, you can have family peace and also work toward better success for your kid if you let them out of school and pursue learning outside that environment.
I think there's just so much information out there and so many different angles that just add what sort of attracts you. Like this discussion has come up so many times in so many different groups. Everybody wants to have this one hub of everything, and which is awesome, but I don't think totally possible. I think the one hub is almost the internet itself because there's just so much information out there, etc. As long as you keep we already know, like Uncollege and a lot of grown unschoolers and a lot of, other self-directed learning groups. Like, as long as you have links to these things and you just keep adding a little bit without making
I see what you're saying. Everybody wants to be everything to everybody, everybody wants to have the one site that's going to point to everywhere. But to tell you the truth, I'm thinking about specific parents. These 5 or 6 kids that we're working with have specific individuals who have specific concerns and even belittle their kids for wanting to not be in school. And I'm thinking about that specific site that would cause them to question the assumptions that they.
Right.
One of these parents is first in school, in college, and is having a very difficult time, and has always had a difficult time in school. So, in a sense, she's sticking up for school because all of her values are based on that,
right,
on the benefit of struggling through that. So, with a very specific focus, it might be useful.
Yeah, I think it could be. And also, there are a lot more than just these 6 kids. That there are on school survival. There are a lot who post and who are somewhat part of the conversation, and they're hundreds of them have responded to the survey that say I'd love to quit school, but my parents would never go for it. Basically,
that's right. 650 people have filled out an extensive survey.
Right, and then of those, a subset have. Expressed, yes, I would quit school if I could, but here's why I can't, basically. Right. But still, that's a lot, and that's just the ones that have filled out that survey.
That's amazing. Not good.
Well, I'm sure that there are a lot more who would if they found it, but then there are the people who wouldn't, who don't understand that it's wrong for them to be so unhappy. And that's what I try to tell kids on Twitter. This is wrong, but it's so hard to get that across in 140 characters or less. And they tend to be very mistrustful.
It's hard to get it across even with so many more words than that, because people have to have there has to be a crack in the armor. People have to have something that scares them enough to look outside of what they already know and believe. It really is hard. It really is hard. One of the things I was going to say before is in where I am in Quebec, which has been the hardest thing over the years, suddenly we have an unschooling group and parents are opening up to the idea. So it's like this amazing thing happening where all we did, we're like this senior group who are amazed to see this happening here, because during all these years that we've been talking about it and trying to start a free school and putting stuff out there was just so much like struggle and patience, and thank goodness we had each other and encouraged each other. So I think the most important thing is to always remember, like, we're planting seeds and keep encouraging each other. I swear it blossoms at some point. And the fact that you have that many kids and that we're having these discussions about how to open them up means that there's something going on. There's hope for them opening up. There's, you already spoke to that parent this weekend. It may seem small, but that's a huge step forward. And once you have, it's like opening the floodgates, right? Once you have spoken to a few parents and you have those parents speak to other parents, like, it's one of the greatest things. And especially it seems to be more often the men. Like, that's been a lot around homeschooling and unschooling as well. Often the mothers will get on board. And a lot of the conferences have special meetings now for the current homeschooling or unschooling dads to speak to new dads to address their concerns, because their concerns seem to be different often than the mothers. The mothers sort of get more easily answer their concerns, whereas the dads seek something else, more stability maybe, more security in what's to come and what's this going to look like and how's this really going to unfold. So yeah, I think as you're getting parents, you're going to have more parents.
Yeah, definitely.
We have in this group we had once a certain parent who was she was more supportive for her child. I remember that the problem was that they were so much tested, and the kid didn't want to do all the tests that were, I don't know, made by curricula, and that's why the parent was stepping in, saying, "Stop! The situation cannot go further because of mine."
It's true. Not all parents are obstacles. Some of them are a little bit more aware of the problems of the situation.
Right, although a lot of those are around the high-stakes testing. Like, they oppose high-stakes testing, but they're not necessarily questioning school in more depth than that.
Right.
Yeah, the alliances that we make around opting out of testing are definitely short-term. Not short-term, but limited in scope. I can engage some of them on the broader issues of what's wrong with traditional factory model schooling, but I lose them after a while because they say, well, yeah, but we have to understand that this is public school and you can't do that kind of thing, So part of what I do is just try to push back against that. If we just take away testing, schools will be fine. It's not true.
We just empower teachers.
I'm sorry?
If we just empowered the teachers, or they empowered themselves, which I think is going to happen in the backlash, schooling would change eventually.
Yeah.
And then added to that all of the stuff that's going to start being understood and exposed outside of traditional schooling. At some point it's going to merge. But the
about
fact
that
that there is a
sometimes.
backlash happening, I think, will eventually change. I mean, we could not release all the kids today anyway, right? What would? I mean, I wish I could take every kid out of school. You have no idea how much that was my wish when I first woke up and first discovered all of this, like, truth about schooling and what it does to us and what it does to society and etc. At the same time, people are learning to empower themselves, and things will change as that's happening. And I find all of this backlash and the bad, is it bat, the bat
Oh
group?
yeah, the bats, yeah.
And, you know, all of that is opening up so much more awareness and so much self-empowerment within the system. Just getting to the kids who are suffering the most and getting them the help that they need is, I think, more my focus now anyway.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Sometimes I wonder if there had never been this school reform movement in the States, would the profession of teaching have moved with the times if we never started moving towards standards, if we had never had No Child Left Behind, if testing hadn't become high stakes? Would education have moved organically away from the top-down, teacher teaches, students learn, as the information explosion took place, as the internet sort of set free, you could do any kind of learning you want? Would that have progressed naturally? And I honestly don't know the answer. Because I
tend
don't
to think
see
probably
teachers,
not without.
I don't see teachers coming off of their methods. On the other hand, there really are, teachers are sort of cast on a rushing river that keeps changing directions, and every time we come up with a new fad or a new teaching mode that we think is the next biggest thing, every 2 years, they say, every 2 to 5 years, they have to completely change how they teach. And this could make anybody circle the wagons.
There is also the same situation as you said. I agree with that. Even it happens here where I live. Teachers that just started speaking about, look, we have gone to college, we have learned everything. I know those people because they were my professors and teachers and so on. And when I had one class last year, I remember a teacher just had this like 2 notebooks of they have to just write the class, what class did she teach, what she has done for the class today, and so on. And we have seen so much of that administration thing that grows publicly now. They even wanted here that the administration should be put aside by some other body to make just the administration calls. They're they're occupied with administration here,
Right.
and even they have this testing thing. It's just like the standardized testing in the U.S. They're really opposed to it. Some are, some not, because politics have put its fingers on our education system here.
Right. Yeah, that's happening all over. But I still think, I mean, like when I was in school, there wasn't all this stuff like 20 years ago or whatever in like middle school and high school. It was still set up around school where you have classes, or like my parents went to the same kind of schools. You have classes, grades, grid schedule in the factory model, basically. So it's hard, I think, for teachers, for most teachers or many teachers, to change out of that. It's hard for parents to change out of thinking about grades and diplomas and credits. So, I mean, that's going to take some changes, I think, beyond just getting rid of testing or administration.
We also didn't have, back in my days when I was a student, we didn't have this testing from the government. There were no such things. Now the problems really started.
But
They
was,
just
was
started
school better then? Like, did you enjoy it? And
better,
it was for.
really better. Even colleges were
Mm.
better. Again, now we see it as education going into murky waters. It's the politics. Again, I say this all the time. It's the politics. What they change, they shift from something that they have to do to something that the government wants, and disaster. But
Right.
many people, when they talk with me, I just say to them, I'm a student. I'm a college student. Oh, I'm so pity. Because why? I was just asking this question. But you have now this new European system installed in our education system. I'm just saying the book was called. I've read the book called The Black Book of the European Transfer Credit System that currently is in my education system, has been signed like back in 2003, and they say it's the champion of, I quote, the champion of bad implementation, and everything was really bad. Even countries, not just mine, let's take every European country in the world is battling with this new, okay, it's not new, but it's old European system that somewhere it's not functioning. It's really poor implemented, poor done.
Right.
They
It's
have
the same
needed
thing as the standardized testing in the U.S. It's poorly implemented, and there's a lot of disadvantages to it on a bunch of levels. But I still think that school, for the most part, for generations, has been, factory model, and it's barring students and parents really learning about how else school can work. I don't see much changing. But I mean, that's where North Star and like what we're doing and stories of unschoolers and so on is useful. Like if students actually learn
There is also,
what's
when we
possible.
talk about education, sorry, when we talk about education, um, does everybody saying, oh, look, we had an education system back then. Now we just want children, to just learn by hand, learn by heart. And we always say the bureaucrat who is doing the tests is just going to test if you know A, B, C, D, and that's the answer to that question. We're just testing kids to do this. It's A, B, C, D, nothing else.
Right.
So Brendan, why don't you talk a little bit about the conference you're going to this week, and what are you sort of focusing on in terms of this alternative education conference?
Right. So yeah. So Arrow's conference is this week and weekend, and I mean, I haven't been to it before, so it'll be interesting. Actually, Ken Danford is going to speak. They have a panel of, I think, North Star liberated learners, teens that are going to talk. Steve Hargadon is going to be there. A couple of other people I've talked to online, and a bunch of others, and so on. So it'll be interesting to see, what it's like and everything, and talk to people about what we're doing and trying to bridge the gap between people stuck in school and these alternatives.
Right. So we have this flyer that I sort of threw together. Maybe we could change it a little bit, but it would be nice to have something there that you could sort of hand out to people. Should have gotten a table. Do they have tables?
I think so. Like, you mean for presenters or?
Yeah, nah, never mind. We don't have a whole lot of information, but just a place to talk to people about.
I'll tell you what you can do. The way Arrow works, they always have like a main conference and then breakout sessions. Unless they've changed the way they function, I've been twice. They'll have like open space where if somebody decides that they hadn't planned to do a mini conference, but they would like to. So if you feel the urge, you want to present Catalyst, usually they'll have some gaps where you can add yourself into to a conference. They'll give you like the conferences of the day every morning. People show up and they'll describe, okay, we've added these, and so if you do decide you want to do something, they usually have that available.
Oh, cool! Yeah, I'll check.
It's awesome.
I'll watch out for that.
Yeah, it's awesome. Assuming they're still doing it the way they used to. This earlier, they usually have it at beginning of June. This is early for them. I don't know why I haven't kept track this year, but yeah. Is it in Long Island?
Yeah.
Yeah, CW Post, Long Island University.
They're actually a great resource. I used to point parents to them, and still do point parents to them all the time, because their library, the books that are available to, even just seeing the number of titles on alternative schools, I think helps.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they have links.
That's true.
Yeah, they're awesome. Jerry Mintz and like I mentioned earlier, Wendy Priesnig were my first two. Like, I don't know how many times I've thanked them. I don't know what I would have done. I took my son out of school knowing nothing about what I was going to do, never even heard of homeschooling. I just sort of threw that word out there. And then luckily discovered unschooling and free schooling through those two. And just, they changed my life. So yeah, we've had fun at Arrow. You'll have fun at Arrow conferences and meeting the youth. And yeah, it's great if Ken's going to be there. That's awesome too. So.
Yeah, definitely.
So we should wrap up, and I'm just wondering if anybody has any specific questions about Catalyst, things that you've noticed that we might think about doing, things that, ways that we could reach out and so forth. Jason, you're still with us? You look like you're there.
He's there. He has on my screen. I see like a mute.
Mute, yeah, he's on mute.
He's got a mic. He's listening in. No, I don't have any questions. I think what you guys are doing and how you're advancing is just awesome. The fact that you're sticking with it and having these hangouts is amazing. That you're already reaching some kids, it's going to keep growing.
Yeah.
And with every parent you speak to and every kid you speak to, I hate to say kid, youth you speak to.
I say kids because I don't know. I don't want people to grow up too fast anyway. I want them to be kids.
They already.
It's okay to be kids.
Mothers.
We infantilize. No, well, I have this whole thing. So we infantilize them, and I sort of encourage their independence. But at the same time, you can have that and still have that. What we really want, I think, is when we call them kids or we stick with them, is to have that deeper connection, which in our world is really hard to maintain. But when you do create respectful relationship, it's amazing that it just stays there. It is there.
Yeah.
And yes, they become independent, and yes, they don't. They have lots of things they're out doing, but you're actually excited to see them out doing these things, and they're excited to come back and tell you about them. And so yeah.
Have you run across a book called Childism?
Childism? I think I've heard of it. Yeah, I've heard of the term.
It's on my shelf. It's written by a woman who was a Freudian psychoanalyst, but a feminist and a child's rights person, and she was sort of analyzing from a psychoanalytical perspective why children are why there is prejudice against children, and how it exists within families, how it exists in society, how it exists in schools. And I loved it, even though I sort of have an aversion to that kind of psycho jargon, but it really was quite good, and I was trying to get a hold of her and see if she had any, groups that were starting to look at this issue. She died. She died before, almost immediately as the book was published. It was so heartbroken because I thought that in this person you might have a leader to really look at issues of prejudice against children, which you just see everywhere.
Right.
And I'm not saying that she had that big of an impact, but it was kind of heartbreaking that she wrote this book that sort of identified prejudice against children, and she wasn't there to lead the movement that might come out of it.
Right.
There are a lot of child's rights people
out there. Nonviolent Communication has got some good books on explaining that kind of stuff. Classrooms have been created around that understanding. When you dig deep enough, because a lot of the nonviolent communication, especially if it's coming through somebody else, will be more either about adults or doesn't go deep enough. But if you read the original, Marshall Rosenberg stuff, it really is. There's a lot of stuff about that. Childism, I'll look up. Yeah. Attachment parenting is all falling into it. Respectful parenting.
The basis of attachment parenting is respect for children.
Yes.
I mean, it's Dr. Spock has a lot to answer for.
Apparently he changed his.
It's true. He wasn't as bad as he
told me or my mother that, because she still believes spare the rod and spoil the child kind of thing that I remember being traumatized by in her book. But apparently he changed afterwards, which is interesting, and there's stuff to read about that. I read a bit, but not much. Yeah. I will look up child.
Yeah. This has been good fun. And you've given me a whole lot of ideas for ways to approach our communications with parents. Thank you very much.
It was good meeting you.
Good meeting you all. It's fantastic.
And thanks to you other guys for coming and listening. And we will have this has been recorded, so you can play it over and over again.
I do that all the time. Just check
when you can't reach us, you can always find us.
There you go.
All right.
Nice talking to you all.
Stop the broadcast. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.